Good afternoon. Matt saying book 7 was terrible of Harry Potter, and I don't even know what that means because I didn't read it. I can say it's a kid's book and it's stupid, having not read it. I have. I saw the movies, but I just not my thing. I tried really hard for it to be my thing. It's not my thing. But we'll talk about that. It's only sort of. This is the problem, which is that when you want a topic to talk about, you got to do something that might get people interested. I hate the thumbnail thing, but it's only really sort of quasi related to Emma Watson and JK Rowling anyway, but it explains a lot. And it might get people thinking more clearly about like how they participate in this dumb crap to do with like the culture wars stuff and how like fandoms and the psychology of fandoms and the psychology of fans, the psychology of the fans that are vulnerable is sort of I'm just going to kind of explain what I think is kind of going on here and how it's used politically, because that's all I really care about. Give a fuck about Harry Potter. Who cares? Have at it. Turn up to like costume parties, dress up as whatever, don't care. As long as it doesn't affect politics, don't care, right? Or have any real like mental health consequences, go nuts. It's not that. But, one thing I do know is fans. And one thing I do know is crazy fans. And another thing I know is how that stuff, it can be abused for political purposes and really where the problem is. And this is why, I've alluded to a course and it's coming. I've been writing it writing a course is a lot of work. It's very hard. Like there's not only the writing of the course, but then there's the production associated with it. There's all of the, the e-commerce stuff, everything that goes with it. Okay. But it's coming. And it's a course on responsible influence. Like after 5 years, it's really keeps coming back to me, funnily enough, full circle, because I always consulted on how to run communities and how to set up user experience. Just come back to user experience design, which is ultimately, as an influencer, as a community manager, as an admin, as someone who's, a famous person or whatever, you need to be aware of this stuff. You need to be aware of your responsibilities. And it's not just, responsibilities, but like this is real stuff. This is a real problem. It's backed in evidence and all that stuff. But I want to teach people how to be more aware of some of this fan shit and how it's weaponized and how you can accidentally. A lot of this stuff is accidental. It's not deliberate. It's not a deliberate relationship. But I kind of want to explain some of the dynamics. Now, look, I'm not a sociologist and I'm not a media studies person. This is like very much, all of this stuff is very in the aggregate. I'm really only interested in, I'm not really going to focus on the sort of the storytelling part because that's more of a sociology thing. I'm more interested in what conduct and sort of explaining the behavior and the phenomenon that we've got. Sorry, let me remince my words. Let me look at the chat for a minute while I get my brain right. Okay, so Matt's here. So also Emma Watson isn't black, and this is probably why J.K. Rowling picked a fight to the death after the fact. Don't mean that the way I just read it. Reprehensible influence. Celebrities are not pillars of society, and that's going to be my main point, first of all, which is that this is where responsible influence comes from, which is that people are, ultimately it comes down to celebrity worship and getting back to sort of this, not just separation of church and state, but separation of sort of fact and fiction, entertainment and serious stuff, real news and infotainment. I think what's happened is that we've got blurred lines. We've got blurred lines because of a broken business model that rewards one type of news. Now, this isn't new. This has always been the case. Okay, this has always been the case since the beginning of time, which is that the business model incentivizes outrage and sensationalism and all that sort of stuff. That's normal. But because we've got a problem of velocity and scale and, the ability to reach and target specifically vulnerable populations, that this is something, again, This is something that I've talked about since the beginning of my career, because I started out my career as a fan. You know, I know what fans want. I know what I want as a fan. And I also know that when, if things go off kilter, that you would hope that someone would reach out. This is another reason why I advocate for sort of outreach rather than, on social media rather than, this sort of banning and censorship, because it doesn't solve the problem. It's convenient for a lot of people, but it doesn't solve the actual problem. But yeah, so what was I going to say? Finding the chat distracting. Sorry, I'm not used to interfacing with like chats, and my attention gets drawn. It's not your fault. I go, okay, I got to learn to. Good, teach me how to ignore the chats for a minute and keep thinking while the chat's going. That's good. It's good training, because I haven't really had that problem yet. So, but what we've got here is a problem that's it's concepts that people might not be aware, and something that, again, there's stuff that people know that is intuitively true. Okay, so when they say, and I'm going to start writing a lot of, when I get time to write about all of this stuff. Most of it's in the course, but I'm going to have to write stuff to support the course. So at some point there'll be articles on this, which is that you'll notice that the most recent blog post that I've got on my website is, responsibility, get off the internet, dickhead. That's like the most recent thing, unfortunately, because of moving. But that was actually intended to be I understand this angle, but also on this side, there's another argument, which is that there is a responsibility to consider. You can't just recklessly, I think this whole, I can say what I want, do what I want without any consideration for who's, without any consideration or ethics or, without having any real ethical framework for how you conduct yourself as an influencer. I think that's honestly, it's just a not only dishonest, and, rationalizing view, but I don't think that it's necessarily very productive. So, okay. No, I'm not telling you to shut up, Matt. It's fine. It's just, I'm fine. I get used to it. It's fine. I need to get used to that. And it's not a problem. I will read it at some point. It's just that it's flicking up. So I go, oh, what's over there? Shiny, ADD. Oh, let's read that thing. It's very interesting. But I'm just trying to finish my thought before I look. That's good training. I like it. Don't worry. It's all good. So, so the deification of celebrities, yes. So this is what I'm getting to. I will get to that. So if you're not familiar with what's going on the last few days, now this has been amping up for a while. It keeps going on, but I think people are losing sight of what's actually really going on. And I thought I might explain a little bit about how this can be a self-perpetuating problem and sort of like this weird feedback loop that's occurring. And it's not unique to the Harry Potter universe, but I think that it is something that we're going to see more of. And I think that we're going to see more in large fandoms, but I think fandoms that have a unique profile to them and a unique set of circumstances that it's interesting stuff to see, right? It is really interesting to see this sort of like I said, it's like a snowball that keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And people keep feeding it. Okay. Now, yesterday I said Emma Watson's an idiot. Okay. I say that because most celebrities are stunted in some way, especially ones, I'm going to be more charitable and say, like, as celebrities go, she seems fairly self-aware about her own privilege and all of those things. But, everyone is a human and they have stuff going on. And I don't think she's bright. Okay. I just don't think that, and everyone has blind spots, but that's okay. So let's start there. Okay. But I also understand, when you look at her bio and you look at kind of how her own story, her own story, the way that she was discovered, child of divorce, lawyer parents, a mother who seems to be, quite a force in her own right. Again, there's not much information there, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, this is just something I've observed, like with mother-daughter dynamics, including my own, and including with my own mother. There's all these. It's always complicated, even if there's this relationship thing that goes on. I'm going to talk about a little bit about that because I think this is something that seems to be getting lost in a lot of this debate, which is what role we play publicly. What role and mask are we playing, and how I've observed this in this dynamic, and I have fucking negative 10 interest in Harry Potter shit. Okay, so I'm talking about this as an external observer of fandoms, just general fandoms, and how particular fandoms that are oriented around sort of hero's journey stuff, around Disney, around Harry Potter, Marvel, good guys, bad guys, that kind of stuff. Especially stories that have deep meaning to kids that are, maybe different or neurodivergent or vulnerable in certain ways, okay? Harry Potter has all of that and then some, okay? So it also then has adults in the community who are sort of imposing a lot of their stuff onto this Harry Potter stuff, and they love Harry Potter. Like there's a weird, sort of arrested development thing going on. Again, I'm not saying it about all adults. I'm just saying that, that it like Harry Potter. That's a silly thing to say. I'm saying certain people are attracted to certain vocations and certain fandoms. This is all based in evidence, okay? Like experiments and studies and all that stuff. Okay. But again, I'm not going to come at this from sort of the media studies angle. But what I'm going to say is just sort of point out what's going on, what might be going on here, and it sort of seems to be snowballing a little bit, which is that princess versus evil stepmother dynamic, wicked queen dynamic that it's clearly playing out here. But but you also need to understand that they're both people. But there's in terms of, again, there's a lot to unpick here because obviously, the psychology of fame and celebrity and the parents of child stars, the psychology of child stars, all that sort of stuff, big field, okay? But let's start with those, things like the type of people that pursue fame, right? There's different groups of people to pursue fame. Like now, Emma Watson strikes me as one of the more sort of fame is secondary to the drive, conscientious type. She seems to have, this thing where she just always wanted to be an actress, and that was, her path, and she was precocious and all that sort of stuff. And, I think much to her mother's disappointment, okay, she sort of went down that track, okay. Her parents kind of tolerated that performance stuff, okay. I think that's where the activism comes in and the feminism, that sort of stuff. But she also strikes me as quite an intense person. So I've done a little bit of reading on her. Again, this is face value. This is not as a fan. This is someone as an objective. I'd go, okay, just researching this. What my takeaway would be, okay, obviously no therapy or diagnostic or anything like that. It's just like my immediate takeaway is that this is an intense person who seems very conscious about saying the right thing and doing the right thing towards other people. She feels a very strong sense of doing the right thing. Okay. And one thing that stood out with me from interviews with her was that she related very much to the character of Hermione, and she sort of went through this. Ironically, she was a fan of the character of Hermione and played it in that sort of, it's what. Trying to remember the theory. It's written here. What's it fucking called? Too many terms. The self-conception, right? Theory. Okay, so what we do is we put all of our, these characters or these celebrities or, people, our favourite celebrities and our favourite comedians even, I do this, I know this, favourite musicians, they represent an idealised version of ourselves, and we tend to sort of see, and that can be healthy, but it can, and because, obviously their positive behaviours and stuff can have an influence on us. But when they fail, we kind of, or transgress in any way, that you feel the identity sort of stuff, and you feel that sort of psychic injury in the same way as if you'd failed yourself. Okay, so that's sort of like a weird psychological phenomenon that we have. But what's interesting is that with Emma Watson saying that she related very much to Hermione and wanted that role and wanted to play that role, and the way she played that role, that there's like a whole precociousness there. So there's a similarity. So that's interesting. Okay, so she was a Potter fan. And that's interesting because she was a fan of JK Rowling by proxy. Okay. So, so it's really that. So that's one interesting element to the thing. This is this is something with no skin, someone with no skin in the game, fucking whatever. I don't care. I don't care about fan theories. I don't give a shit. I know that this community is prone to shipping and all that stuff, and that's why what makes it interesting. Don't give a shit. I don't care. Didn't read the wiki. Don't give a shit. I'm talking about this as an expert in fandoms and fan psychology and, how online fandoms behave and sort of the political impact. Don't give a fuck about the facts of Harry Potter. Moving on. But what we need to do is also look at Emma Watson, the person. Okay, so she's the person. There's a person there. Person with feelings and dreams and who was also vulnerable to this, these social things when it comes to being a fan. She's also a child star, okay? Child stars are generally at risk of various things, okay? They tend to be, very high proportion of eating disorders, high proportion. And if you're particularly if you're prone to celebrity worship, this applies to people who are celebrity worship people as well, okay? Very similar, like pathologies there. Okay, which is that there's more prone to eating disorders, high rate of plastic surgeries and procedures like Botox and that sort of stuff, high rate of addiction and addictive behaviours across the board. Okay, more prone to what else? And also just that young exposure. So if you're a child star, you have an exposure to all these things like drugs and alcohol and sex, and you're hanging out with adults most of the day. There's something that, there's going to be gaps in your development, no matter how much you think you've overcome it. And she's been honest about that, about the fact that she needed therapy, okay? But what's really interesting about this is that she's been honest about it, but you kind of look at the gaps and you go, okay, I understand the subtext here, which is that I think that this is somebody with an immense feeling like she has to be the different one, like she has to be the exception and she has to do the right thing and she has to, it's very interesting. Very interesting sort of counter reaction that she's got going on here. Okay, so there's this thing where she said, "Oh, I've never had this rebellion," but I feel like she actually has in a sense, because her rebellion is to be the straight girl, and I understand that better than anybody. Do you know why? Because my rebellion was to be like the one who didn't drink, didn't smoke, got married, all that stuff. Okay. And in my 30s, I got divorced and I fell apart. So I'm just saying, I understand this better than anybody, which is that there is this high-functioning, high-achiever sensibility where in the context of being a child star, a lot of her, again, I'm just saying this is my immediate takeaway. I don't know. I'm just extrapolating. We're having some fun here. I just find it interesting. Because I think people need to have a more mature view about all of this stuff, which is that, ultimately that she's a person. But also that on some level, she was a fan of JK Rowling and she got let down. Okay, start there. But also that she, I'm not going to talk about Emma Watson in particular. This is just an interesting case study, right? Because she's quite precocious. But don't forget, she's also had like every creep in the universe, like, on her case since she was a little girl. Like I remember the, Emma Watson 18 fucking calculators and, all of that sort of stuff. So you kind of understand also how she would rebound into sort of that Me Too activism, that sort of activism. Also, she attended Brown University and studied fucking literature. Of course, she's got this mindset of ideas around gender identity. She's not scientifically minded. She's, there's nothing, all I see is somebody who's trying to do the right thing. Okay, as much as I make fun of her because she's a fucking child star and, all that sort of stuff, she's clearly in denial about a lot of this stuff. But I think that I tend to be a bit more charitable towards this because I see what's going on. Because when you look at the Harry Potter sort of people that go into fandoms, right? People who are into fandoms, we all are fans of things, okay? Everyone's got a thing that they're a fan of, okay? But those that are online in fandoms, okay, obsessively talking about stuff like this all day, every day, especially about fictional characters, especially about, things that involve sort of this good guys, bad guys, hero's journey and that sort of thing. they tend to score higher, like in the celebrity worship scale and those sorts of other. There's lots of scales, like celebrity worship scale, celebrity attitude scale. What's the other one? I got it written down here. So many of these fucking things. Hang on. This one thing I know about psychology is that they love their fucking scales. Oh, here we go. Public figure and preoccupation inventory, which is a 50-point scale. And basically the goal is to try and differentiate between sort of normal fan behavior, like normal interest, participation, fun, shipping for fun, casual stuff, and the problematic stuff that heads to, disordered behavior, stalking, really unhealthy practices, that sort of obsessive fan behavior, right? That's trying to find that line it's very hard to unpack, right? Because especially in terms of the sort of behavior, okay. But what we tend to do, we also, yes, actually, so I'll look at the rest of the chats, but the royal family worship is a good example of that as well, because, obviously people transfer themselves or, see themselves in various things, and they kind of just, it's just another fairy tale, right? They're not, the real people can never live up to it. Like any celebrity, no celebrity can live up to the mind or ideals of a super fan, okay? And that's a problem. So, but what you've got, so what's unique about the Harry Potter fandoms, or any intense fandom, especially one around fiction, okay, particularly fiction and their intensity, okay, and also like, Twilight was a common one. These things where shipping is a common thing. So if you don't know what shipping is, it's called shipping, where they basically fantasize about a relationship between two characters, okay? So famous one with Twilight was that, like, what was it, Ella and I don't know these fucking characters. I have no interest in that either. Was it Jacob and Edward? Yeah, that's right, those guys versus those guys. So if you can create that tension, Ross and Rachel was if you can utilize that tension, it's a known trope in Hollywood and that sort of stuff, where they will manipulate fans' tendency to ship characters. Some will actually, like, I actually read, when I was researching this, that How I Met Your Mother deliberately put Barney and Robin into this whole shipping relationship thing based on internet chatter around how Robin and Barney should get together. So that was really interesting. So, it's... this is something that, again, like I said, there's normal use and then there's problematic use, much like anything. Gambling, anyway, so this is what I'm focused on. I'm focused on problematic use. And this is what I think what we're seeing here is that sort of problematic side coming to life in a very complicated way that people might not be seeing. And especially the sort of older women who are sort of the JK Rowling cult that seems to have formed here. It's creating a weird dynamic between, like, this sort of daughter-mother dynamic that I'm just watching it, and it's just very weird, okay? But you've also got all these corporate interests that are playing this as well. So let's not forget that part, which is that there's corporate interests and also the darker side, which is, there's going to be pedophiles and pedos and dodgy people hanging out in the Harry Potter communities, okay? There's going to be a fair amount of them drawn to that. Okay, there's going to be all of this, the sort of sinister, sort of dark marketing stuff, the political people, all those people. They see them as an audience in which to capture and move over. I've talked about that before, where, they're just trying to target that segment and move them in a certain direction, nudge them in a certain direction. So you can see how these fandoms and understanding fan psychology and how that's manipulated online is a big part into understanding sort of this woke shit, understanding sort of the MAGA side of things, and understanding radicalization in general. I think that's the part that people are leaving out, is how sort of fan studies intersects with radicalization studies, right? Sorry, no, okay. Just someone. I live on a main road, so I think everything's about me. Anyway, no, not really. But, so there's this unique thing. So Emma Watson sits there, right? She was plucked out of, well, not obscurity. She was out of performing. So there's, again, but this is something that little girls will transfer. You can see how the fandom will transfer the actor's story onto it sort of latches on to the fictional story. And those that, there's a struggle between sort of reality and fiction and all those things at any given moment. The way that and this is the role that the media play in mythologizing and telling stories. And this is why the responsibility is so important of media. I mean, I shouldn't have to teach a responsible influence course because it should just be a given. But unfortunately, it's just something that, anyone with a camera, any idiot with a camera and mic can just start talking, okay, and sort of build influence. But what you're seeing here is that, you've sort of got Emma Watson, the person, Emma Watson, the child star. There's lots of layers here, right? Then you've got Emma Watson, the little girl who was, plucked out of obscurity at her school, relative obscurity, okay, out of her school, okay, and made into a worldwide star, playing a beloved character that she also loved, thanks to JK Rowling, okay, the creator of this thing. And JK Rowling's journey is also this big, larger-than-life story, okay? And again, this is where I think as an individual you can be mindful of what you're seeing in someone. Because J.K. Rowling as the leader of as the turf queen, which I don't know why, because she entered the debate like 3 years after everyone else. But anyway, that's a side point. But she's a person too, okay? She's the creator of a beloved franchise. She's also a single mother. She's also a victim of domestic violence. She's also a fucking, extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily influential, extraordinarily wealthy individual, okay? All of these things, exist in layers, okay? But what we're seeing in this sort of thing is that J.K. Rowling within in the fandom, okay? And it's interesting because the people that are predisposed to the story of Harry Potter was, kids that were plucked out of obscurity, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, all that shit, the same old shit, okay? Kid, suffering, lonely, isolated, weird, different, poor, all of these things, okay? LGBT, whatever, okay? Kid feelings about their place in the world, and they are pulled out of obscurity into something like big, and they're a superstar. Like, that is a story that resonates with everyone, okay? That's a formula. But Emma Watson meets that formula, as does J.K. Rowling's, okay? And that's where it's very interesting, because the real life people are the story. And the people that are drawn to those, remember, the people that are drawn to those fandoms, okay, are predisposed to that story. They have that desire. There's that desire within them to have that unmet need met, okay? So when something like this happens, okay, you're going to see someone like Emma Watson, who's obviously someone who wants to say the right thing, okay, regardless of what the right thing is, according to her worldview, is the right thing to say. But they're also going to create, there's this sort of evil stepmother, wicked stepmother, evil queen dynamic, okay? This rags to riches lady, okay? She's now one of them, okay? She's one of them. J.K. Rowling, I think, represents the mother for a lot of people. For a lot of people, J.K. Rowling has become a mother figure. The wicked stepmother, the evil queen, mother issues, that sort of stuff. And how you can see that, and I'm seeing that, how you see the commentary on Twitter play out. Bad actors, okay, these bad actors who exploit this stuff. The people who are trying to separate young girls from their mums online, okay, I'm seeing it happen. Probably I'm a victim of it to an extent. But, they go online and they get convinced that their mother is an evil queen and that their mother is a narcissist and that they're the daughter of a fucking all this sort of stuff. And that they just get into these communities that are sort of, feedback loops. They're an echo, they're a vacuum of self-fulfilling prophecies where, once they're in and they're convinced that, just normal parenting is abuse and they just, everything, okay? And they get into this stuff. But, J.K. Rowling, and again, there comes a point where she's no longer J.K. Rowling, the woman who was a single mother who, wrote a book and she was in a desperate situation, she's all that stuff. She's no longer that person. She has shifted into the evil queen. And this is the role that fandoms play. And this is why you need to understand that the fandom itself creates characters and creates stories and all this stuff that's larger than life, that is bigger than the people involved, that doesn't even involve the people individually anymore. It's larger than them. And so what we've got playing out with Emma Watson and JK Rowling is this mother-daughter dynamic of team daughter and team mother of, you know, and a lot of these people are like, you know, Harry under the stairs, plucked from obscurity. They got issues. Okay, that's going to happen. The reason why these stories appeal to people is because there's something in them. I'm not saying the appeal, the general broader appeal. I'm saying those who become obsessed with it. Okay, so the people, again, this is more about the research around sort of the higher sort of celebrity worship scales, intense fans, you know, that sort of stuff. When they become intense, it's because they have a very strong identification with the characters or with the celebrity or with the public figure involved. Okay. And yeah, so I'll look at the chats in 1 second. Okay, I just want to finish what I'm. So, but what's happening is, you know, this is the self-conception stuff, right? I keep forgetting that. I've got that. You know, self-conception sounds like self. There's so many different terms, but it is self-conception in this instance. Okay, because they are, you know, they attach so much of themselves to JK Rowling, and that's what you're seeing with the fucking, you know, the worship on that side. Okay. Where they're telling all the kids to sit down. And, you know, I tend to identify, if I had to, I mean, again, I don't identify with the fandom as such, but in terms of what JK Rowling, what I get when I think of this dynamic, my instinct is to tell Emma Watson to shut the fuck up and sit down. Okay, I did it yesterday. Okay. Saner heads prevail and you go, no, that's me, putting my shit onto this person who didn't ask for it and, you know, all of that stuff. I wouldn't want to be fucking famous. I know people who do, who are, and all that sort of stuff. And like, fuck that shit. You know, just too much pressure. Like, people put too much pressure on people to be sort of anything more than human. Okay. But this is also, on the flip side, why you got to be considerate of these things, because this is part of my reason why, you know, I've been somewhat critical of JK Rowling, because I think that this is something that she's been on record as somewhat sort of not critical, but I think because, again, Emma Watson was plucked out of this. She wasn't prepared to be a star. Okay. She wasn't ready. No one's ready. Okay. To be famous. It's a thing that no one is ever ready for. But JK Rowling wasn't ready for it either. Okay, she didn't expect it either. And so what you're seeing is people trying to navigate just something crazy in the public eye and figuring stuff out, but people are holding them to a standard where, you know, they are godlike because they exist in their minds in fiction. They exist as heroes and villains, and nothing's ever that fucking simple for a start. Okay. Like, I can agree with JK Rowling and defend her and think that the shit against her is horrible, but I can also be critical of the way she's handled it, or that, she probably should have consulted with somebody about how to handle. I mean, that said, there's not many people who can really consult on this, but, unlike me, but, consult with somebody who could tell her about, okay, so what we need is a plan. We need some sort of plan around how we're going to manage the community. You need to outreach with leaders in the community. It's like there needs to be some sort of mental, emotional support, because the people that identify strongly with Rowling were really let down, regardless of what she said, because she's not a person in that sense. This is the thing that I've tried to explain to several celebrities when they go through this sort of process of, like being piled on or whatever, like, all this shit. They're not talking to you. They're talking to a version of you that exists in their head. And it's like, you need to understand and empathize with that you don't exist in that moment. You do not exist. Okay. In that moment, you are a humble servant. This is the price of fame. And this is the thing that you get paid all that money and stuff and all that other stuff. That's the flip side. Okay. That's the cost. That is the thing that you get paid for. It's not your performance. It's nothing. You get paid for that cost, which is that you are no longer human when you are in the public eye. That is, you are a character. And this is something that I think people don't quite grasp. because social media has broken that fourth wall. We haven't quite adapted to that. So that's another whole other thing. But, so you've got these colliding narratives of daughter versus mother, okay? And that's a fucking complicated thing. Even the best mother-daughter relationship has its shit, okay? And that shit's going to come out in this community because they're shippers, okay? So this fandom is very much about shippers, okay? So, like I said, shipping, the intense part. Okay, where they do fan fiction, they write spin-off series, they have all this art, they have this strong sense of ownership, okay? Some of them think it's literal ownership. Most of the time fans understand they don't own it. But I was talking about fair use before. Actually, was that the DMCA stream? And I mentioned about, this idea of fair use and ownership. Like that is a constant source of conflict between artist and fan community, and there's a balance there. And this is why that corporate intervention and copyright and that's another complicated area, because that can interfere with the fan and creators relationship, okay? Because there has to be some reciprocity there, and I think that's the problem with a lot of this sort of Harry Potter phenomenon, which it's massive. It's as big as the Star Wars, and they're fucking Star Wars are freaks. Like they're intense. That's what it is. Okay. But what they've created is, if you're familiar with the concept of shipping, it's kind of like this weird anti-shipping between Emma Watson and JK Rowling. But it's what they represent. Emma Watson represents the daughter, okay? The daughter is the symbol of generational change, the symbol of, a lot of baggage living in the shadow of a mother, okay? You see that subtext coming through, and you see the types of personalities that they're highly strung, okay? They are intense. They have some unresolved shit, but they've also they've had some therapy, but they've had a therapist that kind of enables some of their fucking shit and says, it's not you, it's the system. It's not you, it's your mother. It's not you. Like for me, I'm not saying that it's not that. Okay, I'm just saying that, I think therapy, positive psychology has gone sort of a little too far in favor of, again, I'm highly critical of CBT and highly critical of DBT and psychotherapy and stuff. But, like I think schema therapy and a few other, again, you need a combination of things. And again, I'm wandering where I shouldn't wander. They'll get me in trouble in the board, so I'll just leave that. But, I'm saying that there's a problem in psychology at the moment that is probably a little too forgiving of certain, and I imagine that having a very wealthy, famous client would be something that, somewhat impedes on your ability to push back on them as a therapist. Okay, just saying. Because, you're going to get that. But then you've also got this villain over here, JK Rowling, who's not the villain, but, she just represents sort of the wicked stepmother. But also for the whole fandom, there's this whole thing, okay? I imagine that, they've said something about how, like, the JK Rowling, there's like a massive chilling effect around the JK Rowling fandoms at the moment. And people have started talking about it. And I didn't go any deeper because I just go, oh, fuck it, whatever. I understand basically what's going on. When my interest goes, yeah, I don't care. But there's a chilling effect that's, where people feel that they can't even like express support for J.K. Rowling in any way. Okay, so that's because of bullying, and that's where fandom becomes toxic, and that's a whole other thing. But we can talk about that separately. But this is sort of, because this is such a large fandom, there's going to be pockets. But there's going to be a target for all the bad shit. It's going to be a target for political interest because it's a massive audience. Okay, it's also got this, child star phenomenon, which is that you shouldn't listen to child stars. Name in the video. Okay, child stars have their own shit around all of this, and that's what they're generally, like I said, predisposed to certain like stuff. Even if Emma Watson comes out great, she's still vulnerable to this stuff. And you can see there's a subtext here that she struggles a lot with it, and she's always having to fight and tame that beast. But don't forget that there's something in celebrity that is addictive and fame that is addictive. And part of that addiction can be saying shit to get in the papers, saying shit to cause trouble, saying shit to get a love bomb, and that makes her vulnerable to certain political forces. Now, again, I've been on record saying that I think it's, I don't know. I think it's just, I think there's some commercial interests here in pharmaceutical companies and, various corporate interests that are sort of, pushing this emerging market, right, to young girls. But again, this is where Emma Watson could benefit, because even if she's correct, there's going to be a portion of girls who will go out and get Botox just because she does. She'll go out and do this thing just because she does. The science is settled on that. I don't know why people aren't seeing that there's going to be a small percentage of girls who are going to have a massive failure of the system because they have this that they're already vulnerable. They have this connection, but they're receiving messages from somebody that they identify with, who is saying, and they think, I'm going to get more love and more attention from this person if I transition. You can't. It's not outside. This isn't like henny penny shit. This is just like all the evidence supports that, right? That's just level-headed thinking around her responsibility about the way that she speaks. Okay. But JK Rowling has a responsibility around the way she speaks as well, which is that she needs to be aware of this role that she plays. Okay. And again, she tends to not speak in these instances, which is fine. Okay. But I'm just saying, generally, moving on. But what you've got here is this. So you've got Emma Watson here, daughter. JK Rowling here, fucking mother. Okay. In that great circle, you've got the fandom, okay, who love the mother versus daughter narrative. They're already Harry Potter fans, so they love that narrative of the child and the child versus parents and that. She's going to be demonized by that community. She's not a human anymore. She's the wicked queen and all that sort of stuff. Okay. And like I said, they've created this anti-shipping sort of stuff. But then outside of that, you've got the media. Okay, and this is where this is why I've come to the conclusion that the only real way to address this is good old fucking ethics and good old ethics training, responsible influence, the thing that I'm doing, right? But evidence-based, so talking about that, like not one unit in it has to be in your everyday, which is always thinking about this, always thinking about what you're doing and what your responsibilities are. And this is just one responsibility, which is when talking about politics. There's other responsibilities as well. Okay, which is that when you talk about a political position, that is something that you've considered and that you've looked up and that you have all the facts on. You're not just sort of much like a journalist. You're not compromised in the fact that you're just repeating something that is propaganda or something like that. That you're not inciting anyone. That you're not sort of that contagion and all those things are considered, all those ethics considerations. Okay. But yeah, so Matt mentioned sports ball people. Yeah, but that so in the site research there is zero difference. They don't differentiate. They're the same thing. So it's just that obviously more boys tend to join sports fandoms, and grown men and that sort of thing tend to join sports fandoms there, but there's no real differentiation in terms of the psychology and the behavior. So it's identical. So there's no real difference between age and gender. This is just whether whatever you're a fan of, and you might get a bit like anything. It's just basic. If you think about it in terms of addiction, it makes a lot more sense, which is that most people use it normally, and a small portion of vulnerable people for lots of complex reasons, develop problematic behaviors from it. So let me have a quick break, look at the chats. So where are we? Okay, you guys have been chattering. Hang on a second. Where we go? Okay, so Tetris Toast, I'll start here mostly because so Tetris Toast said, she strikes me as a combo of compassion and self-image, which is not unusual, especially for actors. Yeah, so you got to consider her in the context of child star, an actor. I think as actors go, she's the exception. As child stars goes, she's the exception. As actors go, she's the exception. As famous young adult, she's the exception. As, you know, she's the exception in many cases, but there's a flip side to that, which I imagine that she feels, which is that she actually probably takes that responsibility to a toxic level, which is that she's always saying the right thing all the time, the right thing, but she's not being fed the right answers, right? Again, that's just you know, as people go, she means well. I think that's why it's so frustrating. But I also see that that's why the fucking JK Rowling cult gets so upset as well, because they see in Emma, they transfer their daughter. They're disappointed in their daughter, where the daughter is a good person and they love her, but you know, she's not in their image enough. So, you know, they kind of lash out as well. I see that because I see that in myself, that disappointment and that lashing out, and, you know, I have a tendency to do that too. But there's self-awareness that has to come from there. But, you know, what was I going to say? So, yeah, so she strikes me as a combo, yeah, and yet contradictory form of egotism with respect to compassion. But, yeah, I think there's a neuroticism there that I get a feeling that her mum's disappointed. I get a feeling that she just strikes me as someone who's fighting for her mother's approval, because her mum's a powerhouse. Her mum's from what I can gather, she's a famous lawyer in the UK, highly credentialed, you know, frequent wins, and yeah. So I that would be a formidable thing to grow up with, being an actress and being in that sort of vacuous world of celebrity. With, you know, again, like again, this is all outside stuff. Again, this is just as fabricated as any shipping that anyone's doing. There's nothing. I'm just saying that, you know, that I can see how that might be the thing that's going on here, but I'm mostly focused on how how everyday people can really just reflect on how they're transferring their feelings and emotions and you know, unmet needs onto people. Now, remember, we've had a pandemic on. The last 2 years, everyone's been traumatized and scared. And one thing that you need to know about the evidence around all of this stuff, okay, and what's coming. I mean, this was established, but I imagine it'll be more. We've got lots and lots of stuff from this pandemic that's still sort of down the pipe in terms of papers and stuff. It's coming thick and fast. It's really good, actually. We're seeing a lot more of what I've been talking about coming out in the form of actual research papers. Okay, so that's good. But what we're seeing is, what we know to be true is that, you know, people tend to become super fans at vulnerable times in their life, okay? It's not just the time for adolescence, okay? You tend to, you know, if you're going through a divorce or your children leaving home or something's happening or you're unhappy or you're going through mental health issues, having children, having babies. That's another reason why mummy forums tend to be so intense, is because it's a big life change, and then you tend to, you know, that's why they go on to this sort of insane fucking tribal wars over various things, right? Because it's a vulnerable time of life. It's all about identity stuff and identity formation. And when you're going through big life change, you're kind of trying to rebuild that stuff again, that self-concept again, right? So, and again, this is not me. I'm not talking as a psychologist. I'm talking as somebody who understands the internet and knows this is stuff that I've known for years, talking about fans and user experience. I just want to make that clear. I'm not talking as a therapist in any way. This is just what we know to be true, which is that, but a lot of these fandoms are being weaponized by people who just see them as an audience and just sort of funnel them off into like extreme places, right? We hadn't really considered that was a thing. Marketers were just going, oh yeah, that segment's cool. They like Harry Potter. Let's target them. But everyone else was targeting them. Okay. And that was the thing, is that like political people were targeting them with you know, this is the nature of the internet. Maybe it's going to address itself and maybe it will self-correct. But the problem that exists is that outside of the fandoms, okay, so it's not just the media stoking wars, you know, like we saw this early in the internet with like Star Wars versus Star Trek, you know, those religious wars, or, you know, we saw those things. It's not just fandom versus fandom anymore, okay? It is now Emma Watson versus JK Rowling. It's like subcategories of fandoms, or you know, tribes within fandoms, right? It's just this is the thing that I wish I could get through to people, that even if you have a YouTube channel of, 1,000 people like me, okay, that there's going to be people who attach themselves, in good and bad ways, or, that's why I'm very, very conscious of setting boundaries and setting, expectations, and won't be talked to like shit. I had a comment that was just like, stop doing that side face thing. And I'm like, fuck off. Do what I want. Also, I made the side face thing because that's how I sit. Fuck off. Become a patron and you can have an opinion, and you got to be at the top tier. Anyway, so but the biggest problem here is that there's adults in charge that should know this. The media, influencers with large audiences. JK Rowling should know this. Emma Watson should know this. Every famous person with a platform should know this stuff, and they don't. And they do know it, but they ignore it because of their own desire to express their own political views. And I think it was quite naive of J.K. Rowling to think that was going to go well for her. I don't know why. It could have been handled better. But anyway, but what you've got politicians, and fucking, the media. You got, this whole dickhead Twitter cult thing of journalists with no ethics who will just, they're fandom fucking kids. They're shipping. They're basically, all these people that are, they're political shippers where they just make up relationships that don't exist. Like between, feminists and the alt-right pathway, yes, exists. Is it the majority? No. Is it a segment? Yes. Okay. Is everyone at risk of going into various extreme directions, much like a journalist? Yes. Okay. All those journalists, they've gone off the deep end, but they make money. They get paid. Their interest is different. Okay. Some of them are doing it because of unmet emotional needs. Okay. But a lot of them are doing it just for fucking clicks and cash, and they are polarizing and stoking tribal wars for profit. Okay. And that's the thing. And, political leaders are exploiting these fandoms and these very deep, especially with the pandemic, right? We've got a lot of people where, there's been a large trauma, lack of trust in government, and that's why the timing of Rowling was a little kind of, unfortunate. Because a lot of I've said before, a lot of these kids were looking to sort of a mother figure at times when, parents may have been at home and fighting, and, the world was crazy. And, I can see how that, but people also, if you know that people during times of massive stress tend to go and lean in and become deeper fans of things that they enjoy, or tend to go into more obsessive behaviors, then as a celebrity, you could actually, or influencer, you can notice that, and you can pay attention to that stuff, and you can be a bit more empathetic, okay, and understand how, this person might not be okay, and learn how to manage them a little bit better, or, talk to them, or intervene. Like I did a little bit of that intervention with various, places, just, with a few people who needed to just have some hard boundaries set, and, and it works. And then they become contributing and happy members of the community. Even if you end up being the bad guy, it keeps them on the straight and narrow. There needs to be leaders in online communities that know all of this stuff, and that keep people on the straight and narrow, and know when people aren't okay, or at least being able to articulate why they're not okay and what's going on. Because I think there's a lot of people who just set up Facebook groups and set up these things, and they don't understand what they're doing. They have no concept of what they're doing. They have no framework, or, some of them just, they just have these silly courses on Facebook and stuff that are useful, but they're not really good at the sort of crisis management or the conflict resolution, or the really deep psychology side of these things. Whereas, I am, because I've studied fans for been a fan for fucking ever, and been an online fan for 28 years. I know all this stuff, and I've managed the communities around it. And I've observed all of this stuff, and I've, all that stuff. But, there's also, there needs to be more responsible people who, not only, if you're in a community, if you're in a fandom, learning to spot that conduct and call it what it is, okay? Which is, not minimize it and, I mean, I imagine that Emma Watson's going through some, again, speculation. But if you let's assume that she's got mum issues, which most young women do, okay, that maybe she does see JK Rowling as a mother figure, and so you understand how her rejection at her age of JK Rowling is understandable. If you can step into her shoes, you understand where she's coming from, and also why she might, be a little upset about all this stuff and lashing out. I've gone through this with my own kid. I know what this. So anyway, so Laura said, I was bullied. Hang on, let me look. That's the first part. I was bullied also for identifying with Hermione. I envied her for having friends. Yeah. So, I think a lot of us weirdos, dare I say, Laura, related to being Hermione. Matilda's my favourite book, right? By Roald Dahl. I identified very strongly with Matilda. So when I saw Matilda grown up being a fuckwit, that was annoying, and I wanted to bully her, right? I didn't, but I wanted to, because it was disappointing, because she ruined the character. I mean, you can never ruin Matilda the character, right? That stuff sets, but I also had learned, obviously I know what I know, so I stepped back from that and went, okay, I'm not mad at her. I'm upset, right? That it's my own shit. Okay. So Matt, where are we? Skeletor, for what it's worth. I'm not skim reading. I'm just trying to get stuff that I can engage with. So Tetris Toast. I'll never understand fandoms and attachments to celebrities. It's a strange form of escapism. Into that goes way beyond being a Netflix couch potato. Yeah, and obviously that might be a sign that you're actually pretty psychologically healthy, but it might be a sign you're a fan of something. Everyone's got it'll be something. There'll be something that again, it tends to be like, you tend to be more prone to obsessive behaviors, and it might just be your personality type, right? You might just have no interest. I don't have any interest in fame really, but I do tend to form parasocial connections, but that's because I've always been online, and I am a fan of the good parts of fandoms, and I'm not necessarily I don't understand, I do, well, intellectually obviously I do understand it, but I think it's perfectly understandable. I think if you've been different or whatever, maybe you're just a very healthy person, Tetris Toast. In which case, why are you watching my shit? That's for damaged people. There might be damage somewhere else. You might have gone into politics, or you might be too far down the GC rabbit hole, or you might be too far, there's lots. When I say celebrity it's public figures as well, it's politics. A lot of people have gone into politics, celebrity worship, or public figures and stuff. Okay. Standing AOC is no different, or, it's the same thing. Universal across all public figures, across all celebrities, it's the same thing. Same core problem. And traits. So, English. Also, you learn English with Harry Potter and dictionary. That's crazy. That's the thing, I think, also because it's such a catalyst for so many different experiences as children. Harry Potter is, I think it's again, it's like Star Wars. Like you can't, like, I'm indifferent to Star Wars, but to say that is causes injury to a lot of people. But I tend to get obsessive about musicians and celebrities. Okay, not celebrities, comedians. So everyone's got their stupid, as Doug Stanhope would say. Everyone's got their stupid. You just got to know when you're not well and when to reel it in. But again, that line between healthy and unhealthy is very thin, and it depends on so many things. What can look like a crazy fan is perfectly normal, and what could be looking perfectly normal is someone who's sort of, intensely dealing. Like I saw this with the pandemic, a lot of people sort of attaching themselves in unhealthy ways, in varying ways. But it looked like normal behavior. And some people just look like enthusiastic, and you look like a fucking psychopath. It depends. Okay. It's very complicated. And that's why you got to talk to people and get to know them and reach out and, not just judge people just based on one tweet or one comment or, even the media's version of what's going on, right? Yeah, so she's Team JK. Her analysis of class is strong. Yeah, so I tend, again, I agree. I think that she's got that's on the record. That doesn't need to be fucking clarified. I think that this is just Yeah, it's again, but I'm going to be because I relate to her story. Okay, I want nothing more than to suddenly write something where I make $1 billion because I've been working fucking long enough. I need to write. But I'm just saying, like, we can, I think middle, I can relate more to JK Rowling because I've worked my guts out. And most people want that merit that they were promised. And that's what, so different is not about being yourself. Just don't make it define you. You shouldn't be bullied for loving something. Just don't let it be the only thing that defines you. And that's the problem with this identity stuff in general, is that it's weaponized as a market segment or political cause or whatever, when, we're all the sum of multiple parts. Like, I often talk about ADHD and question mark autism in terms of identity, and I don't use that as part of my identity. Any more than I don't really identify as a woman. I just am a woman, and it's not. I just don't understand this. Again, you can intellectually understand the concept of identity. I understand it in terms of sense of self. Okay, so my sense of self is again, maybe it's just because I didn't do enough sociology. And it just seems nonsense. It seems stupid. It seems like overthinking things to a point where you've basically done all the legwork into becoming a market segment for corporate interests. It's just, I don't see how identity is relevant in any way outside of literature and cinema. And, writing a character, a well-developed character, it seems to just, it has, obviously, it's come out of the lit forums for a reason, okay, the media, all that stuff, that deconstruct. I've talked about all the stuff before, but it's come out of these fandoms for a reason, which is because that's the focus. But unfortunately, it's transplanted itself into politics. Like, that fire has jumped the road into political discourse, and it's become convenient and sort of replaced and supplanted class analysis. Okay. Again, there's a thread forming with everything that I'm talking about. Yes, the whiteboard you shared. Yeah, so I shared. It just helps me to get a bit clearer on. I love to whiteboard, and I'm glad that there's room for my whiteboard again in this studio. Now that we've got a bigger house again, rather than that tiny little shit box that we had before, I can actually get the whiteboard out again and actually be a little more, I love to whiteboard things. My handwriting is so bad these days. Holy shit balls. It's because the Lyrica makes I have neuropathy and I drop everything all the time. But yeah. My handwriting's terrible, but whiteboarding just helps me to get structure. So anyway, so Tetris Toast said, Matt said JK Rowling has nothing on my mother. So I'm guessing. Let me think. I'm going to try to guess what shows you like based on that. Hang on. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Throw Mama from the train. I don't know. But yeah, I just think whatever. Let's move on from that. But I could probably tell what kind of comedy you like based on that sort of stuff. There's a strong relationship between the kind of entertainment you're drawn to. You can tell a lot about a person by the stuff they like and the shows they watch. So anyway, I know. You love Disney princess movies, Matt, because it always involves a dead mum. Okay, let's move on. But yeah, so Tetris Toe said they become idealized and then they have to live up to false image that goes even beyond their celebrity. Yeah, and I think this is the problem, and you either get it or you don't. And I've talked about this before, where I had a friend who, public figure who committed suicide over this very issue because She couldn't I had this conversation with her 2 weeks before she died, and she just didn't understand that they were making fun of the lady on the TV, not her. And she was like, but there's no difference. I still feel it. And I said, I know, but that's not going to change. What needs to change? And again, it's not victim blaming, okay? To say this, it just is. And this is where when I talk about this response, like the course that needs to happen or this coaching that needs to happen, I don't like saying that I'm a coach. That's why I've got to say I'm a psychologist just for my own ego. But I don't want to say that I'm a coach, but in the same vein, people need to understand that that's the thing that's part of the job. That's the thing that you sign up for. And those that understand that that's part of the job and that they no longer exist as a human being in those moments when they're interacting with their fans, and that there's a whole bunch of stuff there and you need to understand that stuff. That's your job. That's your job, okay, is to understand that and to treat that with, well, I don't want to keep saying responsibility, but, the gravity and sense of duty or duty of care that I think it deserves. Okay. So sports ball people are child stars even when they're older. Well, yeah, because you've also got sort of the whole himbo. They're not bright either. So they're kind of, and also head injuries and various other factors that go into sort of sports and, all that sort of stuff. And also the fact that when you're a sport, there's something about giving up. When you're elite athletes, I think there's been a lot of studies on elite athletes. I haven't done much of it myself because it's not my area. My area is more in sort of, social media, online celebrity, not necessarily the specifics of fame around sports. And I don't really have any interest in sports, so I'm drawn to the others. But I know that there's a few studies at least that, the thing that makes you an elite athlete stunts you elsewhere. Before, swimmers, before school, they're swimming. After school, they go at the gym. They're constantly training. They only hang out with adults and trainers. They're, again, you've lots and lots of stories of trainers and sexual abuse and all that sort of stuff, okay? And once they get to that elite level, traveling a lot. Only hanging out with other, elite athletes who are also stunted. They don't, and, the parents that push them into that, again, parents don't, see, there's also another aspect to this, which is it depends on the kind of parent you've got. There's been some research on parents of like pageant. This is an emerging field as well, which is the psychology of parents of like pageant kids, like toddlers and tiaras and, parents who push their children in certain ways and the psychology of pageant mums, right? It's really interesting stuff. Hang on, I wrote it down because I was going to bring it up. Where are we? I've got some notes here. It's called Achievement by Proxy Distortion, ABPD, sorry, my mistake. And it's like this whole it's basically, stage mum, but like to a toxic level where, the parent themselves is the sort of thinker, and they're the ones that are sort of pushing the kid. Again, not all. Some of them just do it because the kid, first of all, like I have a feeling Emma Watson is one of those kids where she drove the process. The parents weren't happy about it, but they just went, okay, she's going to do that. That's her thing. She wants to do that. We'll let her do it and support her. That's a supportive parent that sort of lets them do that, okay? But then everything's got, groups, but there is that sort of subset of pageant mums that are just like crazy and intense, but that's actually an achievement by, I'm interested in this. I'm going to do some more reading. I obviously don't know what it's called yet, and I haven't done a lot of reading on it. Achievement by proxy distortion. So it's like a Munchausen's by proxy, but that's for obviously making, kids ill and that sort of stuff, but you've got achievement by proxy distortion. Wonder if you've got trans by proxy or oppressed by proxy. Shouldn't have said that. But yet, you've got these sort of things. I'm funny about, the thing that I'm funny about with psychology is all these scales and things and measuring everything. I think because psychology traditionally has been under fire for not being a real science, there's been this overcorrection to try and fucking put everything into boxes. But, this is some interesting stuff. Like, you got to look at some of this research. But America's funny because they always, they call it social media disorder and internet gaming disorder, and they have 150, I can't even agree on it. So when you're trying to do a literature review or try to search, you got to search for 15 different fucking things. And it's like, can we agree on a term, please? I mean, that's one thing the DSM is good for, is just deciding on what the term is. But yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon anyway. Something Twilight, exactly. Yes. So Matt's confirmed he loves his Disney princesses. I figured. Do you buy the dresses? Have you got the dresses? And we've come full circle on the debate and the discussion and the controversy here. But, you know, this is where I think it's coming. I think people don't really understand. I think this has been a little bit of a teaser on where I'm going, because I think a lot of people have not really understood where I'm going with a lot of this stuff. But it's been like I dived in because I was sitting there going, something's fucking broken and I don't know how to fix it. And I don't know where to fix it. Like, I thought I could start it at sort of that disinformation level on Twitter and correcting information and stuff, but I was still not quite there yet. But I think that the answer lies in trying to reach the influencers, those that are building communities, those that run communities. Again, corporations, agencies, those people, okay. They're the people with the money, so that works. But also, you know, consulting, but also a little bit of coaching. Or if you want to set up, I'd like to, you know, this is sort of an area where I think the solution lies. I mean, yeah, it overlaps with, you know, media ethics classes and that sort of stuff, but it has a new spin on it, which is internet fandoms are quite specific in the way that they behave. And this, you know, the JK Rowling dynamic is an interesting one, because I think we're going to start seeing that where people are just sort of all of people's issues and pain from the last couple of years are going to start manifesting in these characters and these fandoms. And we're going to start seeing it spill out into the real world in a really fascinating way, but in a really weird way, but also in those that are seeking fame, right? I'm doing a thing, I think maybe next week, on TikTok and TikTok stars, and how they're looking at banning TikTok over sort of privacy concerns, but also the broader issue with the addictive nature of TikTok videos and, you know, just TikTok in general. I want to talk about some of the sort of complexity around TikTok on its own, because it's its own beast, and that really is it's another thing where fucking that's with libs of TikTok, you're seeing there's intense people are attracted to this particular vehicle or channel because of these the toxic attraction to fame. So like I talked about, you know how they've got scales for everything. There's this new thing called, well, it's not a new thing, but it's called the fame interest scale. And the thing that's what I was alluding to with Emma Watson, where she's probably in that number 4 category, where she's just, the fame comes as a side effect of her drive. And that's generally associated with conscientiousness, right? But you've got 3 others. So you've got one where it's like the first one where it's like you want the celebrity lifestyle and, you know, all of the trimmings of fame without necessarily, you know, that kind of, you know, Kardashian feminism. Again, Kardashians aren't famous for nothing. They're just really good at fucking PR and marketing. They've figured out the machine, and that's a skill in its own right, okay? So they're not famous for doing nothing. But so that's number 1. So sort of looking at like celebrity lifestyle and just wanting the lifestyle and seeking fame for its own sake, that's number 1. That's highly associated with, you know, high amount of sort of eating disorders, body dysmorphia, a high number of plastic surgeries, high tendency for, you know, they sort of test high on sort of, again, narcissism scales. I'm just, you know, I'm not going to use narcissistic personality disorder because, again, I'm just a bit like about that whole thing. There's a political aspect to that stuff that, you know, needs exploring and questioning, and, you know, labeling people with these things. You know, all of those sorts of things. There's a cluster. There's sort of the dark triad cluster of fucking behaviours online. They're attracted to celebrity for its own sake. And then you've got number 2. I can't remember number 2. What was it? Hang on. I think I got it written down here, actually. Hang on. Let me pull out let me have a look. So it's actually just a side point, but it's actually just really, so, oh, that's right. So you got the vulnerable. So if they're like attracted to fame for sort of vulnerable reasons, so like, you low self-esteem, wanting love, unmet needs, wanting that sort of that validation, that sort of stuff. That's highly correlated with neuroticism, okay? And I'm talking about that in terms of big 5 personality, right? Low self-esteem, problematic attachments. Again, so this stuff is considered this fan shit is a problematic attachment, but also in relationships. I'm not going fucking. I'll just move on. But problem with relationships and how they conduct themselves in a relationship. And also then you've got fame for altruism, okay? And I tend to fall in this camp, which is that it's more that you see fame as the way to sort of get your message out, or to share a message, or to influence others in a positive way. That's sort of fame. Like, you don't like fame, but it's a necessary thing. And that's highly correlated with agreeableness, which I tend to be agreeable, except when I'm not. Except when you tell me to stop doing the side face thing on my YouTube comments, and I'll tell you to fuck off. Kidding. So yeah, but that fame interest scale is really interesting as well. This stuff's really interesting, like fan psychology, fame psychology, celebrity psychology. I find that really interesting. But Matt Brannigan, hello, actually said something very important. As traditional religion dies away, people need new communities to tag onto. And you know what's it's actually true, which is in studies on celebrity and fame and all of that sort of stuff, which is that the higher amount of religion, I can't say this word, I don't know how to say, religiosity, however you fucking say it, the more likely you are to be religious. There we go. Okay. And the less likely you are, so the more religious you are, the less likely you are to worship celebrities. Now that's because that's codified in, if you're actually like living your Christian values, it's a sin, right? But at the same time, there's like even psychological studies, so that the less religious you are, conversely, the less religious you are, the more likely you are to be quite intense about celebrities. And when I say celebrities, I mean public figures. And I think that could be expanded now to politicians, Twitter influencers, social media accounts, YouTubers. I wish more people would get obsessed about me. Not really. I don't want your obsession. I want your money. Unfortunately, you need the obsession to get the money. And for that, I need to make you obsessed with, but I know I can't do that. So fucking hell, trapped. So I'm selling a course. It's religiosity. Yeah, it's just, we all have gaps. Like, it's just one of those words that I always read, haven't heard said, but I also, because of my stutter, it's just one of those, I just need to practice that a few times. I'll get it. But I'll just say the more prone to religion, that's better. No, I will practice that. And how embarrassing. That's live streams. You love me because I'm vulnerable like that. And I just fuck up, say stupid shit. I say the wrong words for things like all the time. Yesterday I said, what was it? I said it was like current year rather than current thing. Like twice when I meant current thing, I said current year. I say that shit. I'm on Lyrica and Vyvanse together. Okay? Cut me some fucking slack. And I've got ADHD. and a stutter. So cut me some fucking slack. I'm doing my best. Okay? I do need notes to remember terms. That's just, because there's so many. See, the thing is, and this is okay, let's talk a little bit about this fucking far-right trickery that they do, this Ben Shapiro shit that they do, which is that, and the internet in general, which is, it's not a loss to not remember a term, okay, of a debate. Tim Pool does this. He does this weird niche thing where they go into this niche fucking term and you're like, and they're obviously just trying to trap. They're obviously trying to trap the user. Did I hang up the stream? I didn't. Okay. They're obviously trying to trap whoever they're talking to, because they'll sort of say, and the person who's an expert, but they'll be on the back foot because they can't remember the word or the term, because I don't know if you've looked at like Wikipedia, politics, political theory, okay? Look up democracy on its own. Look up fascism on its own. Look up these things on their own. It's so dense. Then you've got to remember the philosophers underneath that. Then you've got to remember sort of, there's a lot of stuff to remember. Nobody who is genuine and good faith is able to remember all of these things. And like they do that all the time. They'll sort of trip you up because you you can't remember a word, or you look stupid, or you're fumbling. It's like, no, I can look it up. I'll look it up. That's one thing I'll credit Joe Rogan with, is that if a guest doesn't know or he doesn't know, they'll sort of go, oh, look it up, on, like, that's a good thing to do. That's a sign of someone, despite my frustrations with him lately, that's someone who, I think that's how you can tell good faith, is that they'll let someone fucking stutter or misspeak or, make a typo. Like, I haven't, the iMac over there and autocorrect, and it's just somehow the sensitivity of the keyboard it's just making me do more typos than usual. And also because my hands, we don't know if it's scleroderma, or I know I've got Raynaud's, but like we don't know, but my skin is hardening and I'm starting to develop and I've got peripheral neuropathy in my hands. So if you see typos from me, like more and more typos, it's because my hands are like physically like going like claws, and and especially in the morning when I wake up or whatever, so that's when so if you see that shit, I'm disabled. Fucking cut me some slack. But it doesn't mean that I don't understand, or with enough time to sort of, I go, oh, okay, I remember that. Oh, okay. Like I remember that term, or here, oh shit, I wrote that word down, let me look it up. That's a sign of, everyone will tell you that, well, okay, here we go. Studies on intelligence has got nothing to do with fucking recall, and everything to do with, your ability to, synthesize information and process and critical thinking skills and question yourself, and your ability and willingness to be wrong. That's actually the biggest sign of, indicator of intelligence. But then again, they're the IQ cult, so, so Matthew Brannigan said, you say the correct things, not necessarily in the right order. Exactly. But also sometimes I've got to go circular because I'm just trying to refine a thought, or I'm having a new idea. And what you'll see sometimes is that you'll see the grain of a really fucking great idea. It's just not there yet. And I think that process is a really good process. That's why I like live streaming, because sometimes I'll watch them back sometimes and I'll go, like that's actually this, I'm going to develop that idea. Fucking, you watch these, like, that applies. That's why I find, comedy's the same. Like, no joke comes out finished. Like, it's very rare that anyone would spontaneously just come out with a brilliant joke like that all the time. Most of these things, they're like, oh, that's good. I liked that, but that needs work. Let's refine that. And that's what live streaming does for me, is it's really good because it helps me to sort of refine my thoughts around some of these ideas. So I love the fact that you're interacting with me, because aside from telling me what to do when it comes to like the way that I do things, like that's not, I'm saying talking to me and, the ideas and helping me pronounce words, like that's really useful. So Tetris Toast. Abrahamic faiths dissuade people from putting people on a pedestal, false worship, exactly. So, false gods, all that sort of stuff. Belief systems channel some things away from fixating on things that are undeserving of it. Well, sorry, knocked my keyboard. Sorry about that. Fucking, if you're prone to seizures, sorry about that. Yeah, but also obviously religion weaponizes that stuff, which is I haven't gone into the difference between a fandom and a cult, and fandoms can become cults and that sort of stuff. But religions and cults tend to weaponize a lot of that stuff, which is that they don't. They do. I suppose they don't. Religion fills the same gap. Okay, but again, this is just, I'm an atheist, so I'm going to say this, right? Religion fills a gap that, you can fill with, self-worth, self-concept, self-esteem, self-efficacy, general spirituality, that sort of stuff. I tend to be, okay, when I say I'm an atheist who could be easily persuaded. But I'm just not persuaded. I just haven't I wish there was a God. I just don't think there is. It would be nice to think that was true. I think it gives a lot of comfort for people in pain, and that's what this is. But I just haven't seen any evidence that that's the case. So yeah, and I said, yeah, I agree with verbosity not always being a sign of honesty and intelligence. No, it's actually quite the opposite. I tend to be quite verbose and I talk shit, but I'm honest about that. I don't think you'd ever see Ben Shapiro or someone like that saying that they talk shit or that they're wrong or that, or that they're cherry picking or that they're not informed on something. And I think anyone who speaks with authority on it, even me, like I say this, like I'm just talking, I know stuff, and I'm frequently wrong. I've been wrong many times. It's embarrassing, actually. My older videos, and I go, oh my God, I was so wrong there. Because I was, I hadn't quite gone into to really understand this woke, this stuff, you have to go back and understand and a lot of people who are Americans kind of went, yeah, duh. But they hadn't really connected the dots between that and what was going on online. With the fandoms and that sort of stuff. And there was just something missing for me because it was like I didn't have a deep understanding of the American culture wars. I knew about Rupert Murdoch. I knew about that Fox ecosystem. I knew about that stuff. I didn't know about the university stuff and the university system. It was only when I started listening, I actually I took a few online courses to see in political science, to see the difference. So I took it, I've been doing some of these American courses in philosophy and in economics and, a few other things on like audiobooks and stuff. And it's just different from what I learned. And it's like, oh, okay, they're told different stuff. It's a different language. Okay. Because I was taught that Marx was a incredibly influential and, still largely correct person, and there's a whole legacy and people are built on that and Marxist and blah, 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 blah. Up until sort of recently, the last sort of 10 years, not so much, but, my education was fucking Marx is the shit. If you can get through that shit, you're shit. that was, my, and, America and, that's hegemony is generally a bad thing. Imperialism, bad. World War II, more complicated than just, my understanding of World War II was that it was the puzzle that we were trying to solve was everybody acting rationally in this time. But the Americans tend to learn that there was some sort of hypnosis or the bad people hypnotized. There's this whole weird thing around fascism being an ideology rather than like a phenomenon or a process, which that's what, what's his name? That's Robert J. Lifton. What's the other guy? Robert O. Paxton. I always get the two confused. Robert J. Lifton's thought reform. Robert O. Paxton is he did that was it Anatomy of Fascism, and he says the same thing, that fascism is a process, and people are that's the thing that people don't realize about like Nazi Germany, is that people behaved completely rationally. According to their interest, like women, if you look at women who worked in concentration camps, they worked rationally. They were offered benefits, they were offered daycare, they were offered all sorts of sweeteners in order to do their job. Also, they were siloed, all these things. But Americans are learning that fascism is an ideology, and it's like, over there, far to the right, and it's like a threat. And if we go, you got such a simplistic view. You got, left, which is the Democrats, and the right, which is the Republicans, which they're both the fucking same, basically overlap. They're a Venn diagram like this of the right, by any stretch. And, and they're learned but that's the far left, and that the far left is, and again, this might just be the me. They're fucking, their brains are like, Dave Rubin and I have the same undergrad degree. He has a degree in political science, and I don't recognise what he's saying. But he knows better. Jordan Peterson did a degree in political science as well, believe it or not. I don't recognise what they're saying. They're taught completely different things, which is really, that was the thing that I was like, oh, okay, America. okay, I get it now. They're different to us. Because I did do, like, I learned about, obviously I know about the American political system, and I know about the impact of American bullshit, and sort of as an Australian, I learn about American politics as an Australian, but I didn't understand the degree to which the milieu was controlled in the United States. That shocked me. It continues to shock me. It's just, and that's why when I say death cult, I fucking mean it, man. Anyway. But these fandoms have sort of, this is how this is all just sort of lots of moving parts. But that's a whole other that's a whole other thing. I'm going to be, again, that never finished essay. If you want to donate, find someone to pay me to commission to write the what is wokeism for the fucking the definitive guide on what this is. Okay? It'll be like 5,000 words and no one will read it, but no one, and everyone, all the men will show up with their fucking unsolicited essays in the comments because I'm wrong. But if you want to find someone who will pay me a fortune to write that shit and then make it available for free, because we all know that the left has so much money, I'll do it. But otherwise, I'll just do it when I can. So Tetris Toast, it was syntonic with their needs and values at the time. Yeah. This is the part that, like they just, it's in us, all of us. And this is the part where I was like, I see this happening over and over again. When I warn, it's like, this comes from an understanding of, I think, we're doomed to repeat it because we don't understand it, which is that this is within all of us. It is not a fucking psychosis. It is actually people doing their jobs rationally every day. It's turning up and it's being in a silo and it's like rubber stamping everything. It's like, you see this with people who work in the immigration department with the detention centres. You see this at, Nike, rubber stamp. You see this at Apple, rubber stamp. That corporate stuff is not dissimilar. I'm not saying it's the same. I'm saying it's not dissimilar. Very different thing, right? Fascism is a consequence and an outcome, not ideological. Exactly. And they've turned it into this weird thing where, only the right wing are fascist. It's like, well, no, if you understand fascism for what it was, large parts of the left were co-opted into this movement, and it could not have reached the critical mass that it did without large support from the middle class, large support from conservatives, and it was actually an unholy alliance between fascists and conservatives in opposition to Marxists, okay, or communism, and we're seeing this in the United States. That's why this Red Scare stuff is institutionalized fascism, because that's why it scares the shit out of every socialist when they start talking with Red Scares, because that usually ends in it usually ends badly, okay? This anti-communist rhetoric is terrifying, okay? And I initially fell for it because I was just like, I hadn't exercised. That's the stuff that's embarrassing, where I was confused because I was like, this does seem like they're fucking, and I just recalibrated and I went, no, I don't believe it. That doesn't sound right. I went back to basics, back to history, back to theory, all of the stuff. And I went, you know what? Nah, James Lindsay's wrong. This is bullshit. And he is just knocking off shit from the 60s and repurposing it and calling it scholarship. It's bullshit. So left and right are both vulnerable to perpetrating fascism. So fascism is actually something where it had a lot of it. And another thing that I think is worth remembering is that fascism had a lot of support from the intellectual class as a concept. It was, celebrated as a compromise between, that third way stuff, that, compromise. This is why when you hear, Hillary Clinton and people like that fucking talking about third way and sort of all of the behavior that they're doing, you can see how institutionalized this fascistic model is in the United States, okay, which is that it's deeply chilling, okay, and I think that, it's scary stuff. But yeah, it is vulnerable to a toxic metamorphosis. I can say metamorphosis. I had to practice that one when I was a kid too. That took me a while. That's when my stutter was a lot worse. But I think it's like really having a deep understanding of not just how fascism gets in to like the right or like in politics, but how it can rise within ourselves. Within ourselves, because you can fight it if you're not vulnerable to, you have to know it. You have to understand it to be immune to it. Much like this culture war shit, or much like this fandom shit. This is why I'm studying psychology, because psychology helps me to sort of round out a lot of what I already know, but it gives language and science to it rounds stuff out and clarifies some solutions that I was struggling with solutions because it wasn't part of my toolkit. And those people that are in psychology and digital psychology, they're probably not really, I'm not saying I'm the only one, but I think that I've got something of value here because I think the influencers, and I think there's something here where I can bring some of the science together and bring some of that expertise together, but also bring in some of the political angle together. And we've sort of got some good stuff here. I hope. I don't know. It's also commercially viable, hopefully. I don't think many people will be interested because I also know that most, having done ethics coaching and user experience stuff and, all that sort of stuff, and quit because of ethics, and, tried to run an agency that was ethical and trying to compete against unethical agencies. I know what the demand is there for those that want to do the right thing, and it's not high. It's a lot of lip service. But I'm trying to figure out a way to create the course in a way that it will be, they sign up for it and pay for it, and then, like the diversity, but, punch in the guts type, and then they can just say they did it but not do anything, because I know they won't, but they can at least take the course. That's always the challenge, right? So anyway, I'm going to go. It's been an hour and a half, so I'm going to go. I'm going to be back tomorrow talking about the PR guy. Some of these things are beneath me, but, I think there's some important stuff going on here, and I'd like to have my perspective on it. Also, I need to get my muscles back. And now that I've got this studio and my whiteboard and all of those things, I am more inclined to stream, and I want to get my muscles back. And because I'm going to be filming all of the fucking videos for the course and all that stuff, I got to start, I got to really get my video game on, so to speak. Anyway, I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye. Fuck it. All right. Have fun. Thank you for coming. Thank you for chatting. Thank you for interacting with me, because I like the conversation. It's good. I also like it when I'm sort of presenting the big, there's obviously a lot of theory under this for the course, but you can go as deep as, or you can go as shallow, as deep as you want, that's what she said. But I think that there's some important stuff here, but it's good to see what people who watch me and who subscribe and stuff feel or think about what I'm saying, because I don't want to, it's hard. Anyway, you got to have, it's really tough, to solve. These are very complex problems, and it's very hard to distill this stuff into something that sells. They're kind of in opposition to each other in many ways. But I'm doing my best. So the streams will always be the fun ideas where you might see the beginning of the idea, and it will come sort of further down the track and further down the pipe as something a bit more developed. But I like streaming. It's fun. Anyway, I love you. Thank you for your precious last seconds. I'll be back tomorrow. I committed to a stream tomorrow, so I'll be back tomorrow. Dickhead. And I love you too, Matthew. Thank you for showing up. I really appreciate everyone who watches and interacts and stuff. It's good. I appreciate it. It actually rounds out a lot of my thinking, and I like getting positive feedback and constructive feedback from bros as well on, where I, like a study I might have not seen or something like that. But don't assume I haven't read it. That balance. Don't assume I haven't seen the study, but, suggest the studies if you those sorts of things. You get the fucking balance by now, guys. You've had how long to learn? Women have been telling you for 20 years online what the line is. And if you think you should, if you're going to say, if it starts with actually, don't comment. Err on the side of not commenting. If you got something to say, or you think that I might have missed something, then frame it in a way that's friendly and not Don't assume I don't know stuff because, I know quite a lot, but I do have gaps, like how to pronounce basic words. But that's because I, read a lot. So no fucking fireys. Let's go. I'm going to go. Fuck off. Everyone, fuck off. Go do some real work. I love you. Bye.